All right, welcome to the CatholicPsych Show. I'm here with Dr. Gerard McNicholas. Today we are talking about the Pope's endorsement of a new book, AI robots and the latest in AI development. We'll talk a little bit about Gen Z and Gen Zers living at home. And if we have time, we'll talk about Mr. Beast and his new record. For those of you who don't know who he is, we will explain. And then maybe we'll talk about a toddler who had a raisin stuck up her nose for 3 months. Dr. Gerard, how are you doing today on Hump Day?
Doing good. I feel like Pope Francis always makes any day, especially in the middle of the week, as you said before, feel a little bit more confounding. So it's
little confusing.
Yeah, absolutely. But otherwise,
All
good.
right.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Good. We want to help people get through their week. It's. What do you think is the worst day of the week, Tuesday or Wednesday? Dr. Greg would say every day is a wonderful, lovely day. Well,
Of course.
I disagree.
You have some feelings about Tuesday?
Well, Tuesday's rough because it's not Hump Day. It's like you're in the doldrums, you're in the mess of it, and it's like there's no hope. Wednesday, at least you're like, okay, maybe I can hit the down curve and get through my week. So I think Wednesday's slightly better than Tuesday, and you start to look forward to that relief of the pressure of work.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on this?
Not to sound too diplomatic, but every week feels a little different. Like sometimes I'm just sure that Friday's going to roll around and I'm just going to be in the best spirits. And sometimes Friday can come with its own challenges. It's like the parts of myself that are already, in a kind of senioritis, ready for the weekend, making it that much sometimes harder to kind of stick with the tough stuff. So, I guess I'm feeling positive and challenged by the middle of the week here.
That's great. That's a great starting feeling going into this story, which is confounding to say the least to me. All right, so our dear Holy Father, Pope Francis, has written a preface for a book by an LGBT rights activist by the name of Father James Martin. The preface is a little confusing. He doesn't talk directly about LGBTQ issues at all. He just praises the book. The book is about the miracle of Lazarus and his rising from the dead. Let me read a little bit here, some of the quotes from the Pope on the book. Pope Francis describes Father Martin, who's a very controversial figure, as an author of many books that I know and appreciate, and a writer who has the perspective of a person who has fallen in love with the Word of God, always fascinating and never predictable. The biblical text came alive. And then as he went on to talk about the text itself, the Pope illustrates how the faithful can practically feel the profound meaning of what Jesus does when he finds himself before a dead man who is really dead, whose body gives off a nasty odor. I mean, it's kind of beautiful the way he's poetically discussing how Christ loves us in our sinfulness and our sinful humanity. Jesus isn't scared of coming close to sinners, to any sinner, even the most brazen and undaunted. Jesus' concern is that no one goes missing, that none are deprived of the possibility of feeling the loving embrace of his Father. Okay. As I read the careful arguments and exegesis of the biblical scholars he cites, it made me wonder how we often manage to approach Scripture with the hunger of a person who knows that the Word really is the Word of God, continues the Pope. Okay, so he's just praising Father James Martin here in the text about Lazarus. What's your first reaction to choosing to write this preface for the book written by an author who's very controversial and in support of LGBTQ issues within the Catholic Church?
Well, I know I'm not answering the question, but if I read this preface and didn't know what the book was yet, I would really be intrigued by wanting to read the book. I think that the story of the raising of Lazarus is one of the most emotionally rich, meaningful, complex, kind of accounts of, the integration of the human and the divine. And so to use that as a metaphor for any point of human suffering and kind of the raising of dead aspects of who we are is just, it's a really beautiful image. And so it would pull on my heartstrings. I guess I would say that.
Right. And so the reason, so some are trying to make sense of why he would write a preface to this book. And they're pointing to the fact that this is coming right after a controversy recently, when he told Italian bishops that there was too much. This is the Italian word, frassiagine, in the seminaries, and that word is translated as faggotry. Right. So it's as if the Pope had come out and said, "There's too much faggotry in our seminaries." Now, this was obviously very controversial. Perhaps there was a mistranslation of the a language issue, mistranslation of the word. But even still, if he was suggesting that there's issues in the seminary with too much same-sex attraction, I don't know what he meant by frassiagine, but this was controversial, and the Vatican issued a statement afterwards apologizing, saying he did not mean to denigrate anyone, insult anyone, make anyone feel terrible about in a derogatory way about their same-sex attraction. And the church would hold the position that there needs to be deep sympathy for people who are suffering with same-sex attraction. We should not marginalize, reject, criticize them, but to embrace them and invite them to a deeper calling of communion with God, and to more deeply internalize Christ's love, and work and potentially work through, maybe from a psychological perspective, what's going on in terms of their same-sex attraction, but not to reject them, right? And I always want to give the Pope the benefit of the doubt because he is our Pope, and sometimes I think like he's a clinician's Pope, right? He's like what we do, because there's so much nuance, and in the public sphere, we hate nuance, right? We polarize, and we want to be angry or in full support, and idolize a figure or absolutely demonize a figure, right? And there's so much that you discover of what Pope Francis says that like once you dig into it a little bit, it's like, oh, he actually is Orthodox. Like he actually, if you clarify his position, it's aligned with church teaching and the way and what church teaching has always been. However, the way he presents it, it's as if what we would do in clinical work, it's like meet someone where they are. You have to meet someone where they are, and then move them forward to the truth.
Yeah.
He's like anti-fire and brimstone, right? Which cuts people off, rejects them, makes them feel rejected, criticized, judged, and then they paint a broad stroke in terms of what the Catholic Church is. And I like to think that his pontificate is attempting to avoid that. A few weeks ago, we were talking about the 60-minute interview he had, and he talked about immigration in that context. And he said, anyone who would turn away an individual at the border like this would be absolute madness. And Dr. Greg actually went back and forth with some commentary with someone on this. And Dr. Greg made the argument that like allowing people into our borders when it's harming us is problematic. And it's actually could be considered a moral evil if this is done, right? Like if all the immigrants are coming over the border, the southern border from Mexico, and it's causing problems with poverty in our country and is causing socioeconomic unrest, it's like then we need to close the borders. And so when I first heard that, I was like, wait a minute. I always thought that the church was really sensitive to immigrants. And I heard Dr. Greg's argument. I started thinking about it like on a personal level. We always want to compare the personal, like the micro with the macro. And it's like, you can't take care of someone else unless you have your house in order. You got to have like healthy boundaries to be in a place of like self-possession in order to give, right? It's not that we shouldn't give. We have to give, but we can't compulsively give at our own expense. We have to if I'm drowning, if I'm in a plane and the plane's going down, I got to put on my own oxygen mask first before I can help someone else. Like that's the basic position. But like, seemed like St. Francis was saying, no, like allow all the immigrants in. But then I saw people talk about, I read another article about how he's historically said the same thing as Dr. Greg. Like we want to help, we want to help immigrants, but like only to a point where like, it's not detrimental to like it has to be considered like the status of the nation allowing people in. Like we need to consider that
into account.
Right. But you never would have gotten that from the first comment. Right. And that's so often the case with Pope Francis, where he says something and you're like, well, it just seems so inflammatory. And the polarized people within the church just want to like villainize him. And So that's the only way I make sense of why he would write this book, which is like, let's meet Father James Martin where he is. We're not going to condone these other books he writes about same-sex attraction, but this is a man writing a beautiful treatise on the rising of Lazarus. Let's not kick him out of the church, and let's meet and let's sort of meet him where he is. What do you think? Am I way off in thinking like this is exactly what we do in clinical work? Like, not everybody that comes to us is living in accordance with the teachings of the church, but we have to meet them where they are.
No, well, of course, and like that's why I think that even going back to like the infamous early quote from Francis, "Who am I to judge?" Like there is a reality in which Christ's words just echo through that. Do not judge,
Right.
lest you be judged. So it's like there is a way in which that is absolutely true, but it's presented, and I'm sure the media runs with this. It's presented in a way that that's meant to contradict 2000 plus years of church teaching and tradition about what we believe is morally in line with a person's good and ultimately their salvation. So I just feel like it's true, but the context surrounding it, like even this apology for perhaps a misuse of terminology around seminaries, or perhaps a particular word that does get to a real issue within seminary formation. It's like, well, what is the apology for? Like that's what I just feel like starts getting so confusing, and so
nuance. There's not enough nuance, or he is nuanced and people misinterpret the nuance.
Yeah. So I mean, I just wanted to, like, again, just going back to his actual words in the preface of Father Martin's book.
Yeah.
So he says, rooting himself firmly in the Ignatian tradition, Father Martin brings us directly into the story of this friend of Jesus. We're his friends too, dead as we sometimes are on account of our sins, our failings, and our infidelities. The despondency that discourages us and crushes our spirits. Jesus is hardly afraid to get close to us, even when we reek like a dead body that's been buried for 3 days. So again, I mean, just such powerful language. And then, I mean, right in the middle of this is not afraid to come close to our dead parts in sin and our failings and our infidelities. What's going on in seminaries? Like what sins, failings, and infidelities are actually being pointed to? Like what is the point of deadness that Pope Francis and then Father Martin is speaking to, and what is being raised? What is being healed? What is being brought to new life? Like I just feel like it's so dang confusing and jumbled.
Well, the thing that concerns me, it's not just when we say the media takes what Pope Francis says and runs with it, but it's like the Catholic media takes what he says and runs with it.
Sure.
You have someone like what's his name, Dr. Taylor Marshall, whatever, like the ultra kind of conservative Catholics. That I mean, how I learned about this article was Dr. Taylor Marshall went live yesterday, and the headline was something to the effect of Pope endorses gay book or LGBT book. Like, that's not true, right? But it becomes fuel to the fire of this position that the Pope is problematic. And then, as I'm trying to make sense of all this today, because I hate the division within the church, it drives me insane. Like it's hard enough to be a Christian. Like we don't need to be fighting with each other. Can we begin to walk in the same direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to make sense of why he would endorse this book. I'm trying to think of it in terms of nuance. I'm trying to think about my own clinical work and meeting people where they are. And then I find this piece of news this morning after the original story. Pope tells 22-year-old gay 22-year-old gay seminarian rejected from the seminary to go ahead with your vocation. What does that mean? I mean, he
I don't know.
What does that mean? So according to the Italian newspaper, the Pope responded to an email, Lorenzo Michele Noe Caruso, telling him to, quote, go ahead with his vocation just days after the Vatican issued an apology for the pontiff's use of a slur in reference to seminarians who identify as gay. The Pope's handwritten note was attached to an email. It says, Jesus calls all. Some people think of the church as a customs house, and this is terrible. The church should be open to everyone. Brother, go ahead with your vocation. The last I heard with church teaching is there's a concern about allowing seminarians to make it through seminary and become priests when there's, I believe the quote is deep-seated tendencies of same-sex attraction, and here, meanwhile, the Pope is saying there's challenges with same-sex attraction in the seminaries, and then, I mean, we don't know the nuance of this also, but this guy was rejected from a seminary for issues with same-sex attraction, and the Pope is like, "Go ahead with your vocation."
Yeah, it's just so
What?
vague.
I don't even know what that means. What does that mean?
Yeah, I know this is like a incredibly clunky analogy, but I'm just thinking about like Francis in a fatherly disposition and just how deep the need is for fatherly loves, given the father wounds that we all carry. And I'm just thinking about like my own vocational path and calling, having discerned the priesthood, and then being married a
Yeah.
few years back. Like I'm thinking about the seminary in a certain degree in alignment with a time of engagement. And if before my father, I was letting him know I am struggling or suffering with some things that, as I think about like the vows that I'm about to take, like
Yeah.
it scares me to think about like, will I be able to continue to work on myself? Will I be able to continue to heal and grow? And there's a part of me who's kind of getting cold feet. And my father said, continue on, like take heart, take courage, like move forward, like you will be given the grace
Right.
that you need. That's a beautiful sentiment. But if I was struggling with fidelity and sin, and what are these points of language? If I was struggling with sins, failings, and infidelities that directly contradicted, the time of discernment, the time of engagement, and then the vows that I was preparing to practice for, and my father said, "Continue on."
Right.
It's a completely different connotation and meaning.
Yeah.
So it's
Different
like I think
context.
so I just think this goes back to like as Francis, like I think we're just trying to understand the heart of our Father. Like what is his
Mhm.
disposition? What is he trying to say? Like how does he see us, and how fathers particularly are meant to hold a certain degree of kindness but also firmness in giving us the boundaries that allow us to feel safe.
It's a great point, but fathers are also called to transparency. Like we are
Sure.
owed access to the heart of the Father,
Hmm.
like our
Hmm.
our, our biological fathers. What does Christ reveal to us? Like the heart of the Father. He who has seen me has seen the Father. Right. So
Hmm.
the opaqueness, I think, of Pope Francis at times for
Yeah.
me is really frustrating, especially when like my own personal values is to bring people together, and it just doesn't seem like he is. And maybe he has a broader view of bringing people together, which is it's not like bringing Christians together or Catholics together, but
More
it's like
ecumenical.
the world together,
Mm.
right? And maybe as a result, like Christians are furious about it. And I mean, we had a few weeks ago, we never got to the story on the Catholic Psych Show, but there were some nuns that left the Catholic Church. There's a group of nuns that left the Catholic Church because they don't trust Pope Francis, and like the division is really really upsetting for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm wondering what the chat thinks about this. Wherever you're watching us, whatever platform, Instagram, YouTube, send us some messages, share your thoughts with us on the latest in Pope Francis controversy. To be fair too, we do cherry pick these stories, right? I mean, there's lots of times when I'm looking at stories to cover with Pope Francis, it's just like some beautiful expression of his love for the Eucharist. I don't talk about that.
We should. I think we should.
I don't talk about that. I don't pull that as a headline. Pull that out as a
Hmm.
headline to discuss. So I don't know. Maybe it's just the nature of the beast of looking at things to talk about
Mm.
that
Mm.
like we're highlighting the more problematic statements that he makes, and we're choosing not to be. Maybe just me. This is my shortcoming. That I'm choosing not to be edified by the fullness of what his pontificate offers.
Have you ever heard of positive psychology?
Tell me more.
Bad joke, psychology joke, but I mean, that was what Martin Seligman gave us the
Yeah,
gift of in terms of kind of what you're even seeing in a micro level, at a macro level of where psychology fell short, and while we needed to look at the fullness of the picture of the human person. And so I think it's we have a natural draw. Even some of our neuropsychology pulls us towards the negative
yeah,
in a
right
vigilant
on.
kind of way.
All right. Anything else you want to say about the Pope, or should we keep shuffling along here with news stories?
I'm sure we'll be back to the Pope soon enough. But yeah,
Okay.
shuffling on.
Okay. All right. Palate cleanser here. I never really want to talk about politics. I never really want to talk about. I don't want to talk about politics. I really don't want to talk about the controversy around the Pope very often, because these are such divisive issues. But I always want to talk about AI. I don't know. I don't know if it's because I grew up with Star Wars. There was a new Star Wars show that came out last night, The Acolyte, which was fantastic, at least the first 2 episodes.
Cool.
But I want to talk about these AI robots that are coming out now. So there's advancements in AI robots. So they're learning. They have this. There's this. AI robots are now developing multi. Okay, let me read this from scratch here. Engineers have developed a generative AI model to help multi-purpose robots learn new movements and tasks in unfamiliar environments. Applications include basic motions like flipping a spatula or turning a wrench. So I hear that and I'm like, C3PO. Like, I think of, like, there's the fear of like the world brain of AI controlling us. But I think we anthropomorphized AI way before we're thinking of it as a supercomputer. And that isn't like the world of Star Wars and robots and, even like hybrids, like from Star Trek. And this doesn't scare me at all. Like, if I get C3PO, he's like his own entity that we program to like love and serve us.
Right.
Yeah, that's fine with me. But I think, like, what the article is saying, that like that's actually more difficult than one might think. Like, creating a supercomputer is one thing, but to have like multiple data sets programmed into a robot is much more challenging. But this is a step in the right direction. So it's difficult to efficiently incorporate data from so many sources in one machine learning model. So many methods use just one type of data to train a robot. So this is saying the robots are now able to get data from a bunch of different directions, and so now do more complex tasks.
Sure.
And so I don't know. What do you think? Are you down with C3PO? Do you want robots? Are you? I mean, I talked to Dr. Greg a lot about AI. Where are you at with AI?
Well, if you haven't felt, like missing Dr. Greg in the conversations today and Monday, I'm sure you'll feel it now, because I think I'm just beginning, literally, like just this, I don't know, last 3 months that I download ChatGPT for the first time. So I just thought I have to kind of bite this bullet and see what this whole experience is like. So
Listen, my dad to this day does not know how to operate a VCR. Like, do not let the technology. He stopped at VCR. Okay, do not let technology pass you by, or you're gonna die young or something. I don't know.
So I mean, everything you're saying about like the more, I don't know, inhuman kind of more task oriented, aspects of AI. I think you're probably not alone, and there might be a relief in that. I saw a great meme pop up. I think it was actually written by an artist and an author who said, the problem I'm seeing with the way AI is going right now is that let me make sure I'm getting this right. I want AI to be able to cook me dinner and fold my laundry so that I could write stories and create art. But what I'm seeing is that AI is writing stories and creating my art, so I have to still go back to these kind of rote, kind of tasks that I would love AI to start picking up, the slack on. So, so I think this is a nice balance, because my first experience with ChatGPT was very personal. I mean, it's created to make you feel like you are engaging with a personality, with humor and perspective and nuance, and so that was unsettling, but kind of exciting in a weird way. And, I probably did what many people do. It's like, let me check this thing's rationality and logic, and let me see how it handles an argument. And I mean, it hung. And that's what's just so, I guess, intimidating about that side of things, moving. But I think that we're seeing like that's actually less likely to kind of develop in that 3CPO kind of way than maybe our imagination kind of maybe.
I'm just hoping lightsabers are coming right after. Everything changes when I get a lightsaber. Go on. Well, it struck me as you were talking, I was thinking about like how people, not just AI itself, but how people feel about AI. And I was watching a Lex Friedman podcast recently. And I love Lex Friedman, and he's been interviewing a whole spectrum of people and experts on what their feelings are about the risks and dangers of AI. And the most recent one was a major doomsayer. He was a doomer. He's like, sooner or later,
not good.
Yeah, like there's the outcomes that are coming are like even if it's like we're like animals in a petting zoo, like we won't even be able to create meaning anymore, much less AI, like general AI. What's it? General AI? General AI. Like murders us because we lie. Like there's no need for human beings
like
anymore.
a Terminator or T2 kind of.
Mm-hmm. But he's like, it's inevitable. It's inevitable. And then you find, I saw another interview recently that with a scientist who was talking about how like actually there's never going to be this tremendous burst where there's a jump like where it becomes like a sentient super computer that, because the amount of data for these language models that needs to go in, it's like, it becomes like cost prohibitive. Like you would need billions and billions of pieces of information that like the studies show. Yeah. The studies show that like, we're never going to get to that point. Like the curve just kind of balances off at some point. So this guy's saying like, nothing's going to happen. Right. And then there's some people that are super optimistic and some are negative, but I can't help but think of how, what is the line in which people are frightened psychologically, interiorly? And it's about control. It's about control. There's so much projection here, right? Why do we want control in our lives? We want control because that's one of two things that helps with anxiety. Sure. Right? If we think about anxiety existing as a result of the fall, right? It's a result of our separation from God. We have this death anxiety. Didn't exist in the garden. And the sort of remedy to anxiety is actually communion and relationship and connectivity and trust, because on some spiritual level, it's disconnection from God. But when we're hurt in our lives because of original sin, we don't go automatically to trust. We say, I can do it myself, and I'm going to control things, and I'm going to plan things. And on a surfacey, superficial level, the anxiety does come down when we're in control. Why do people not like flying? Because they're not in control, myself included. Why do people not like public speaking? Because when I'm in a conversation with you, I'm reading you, right? It's just you and I, and I could like unconsciously
out of your control, right?
I can control you, and I can like respond to you, and like even unconsciously we do it. We all do it. But when I'm in a crowd in front of many, many people, well, then I can't control people's reactions.
It's a lot of faces to control, right?
Right. So control. So I think what AI represents for people is that I start to become terrified when I lose control. When the AI has more control than me, I don't trust that thing which has power over me. This goes all the way back to like family systems.
Yeah.
Do I trust that did my parents showed me that I can trust the power that they have over me, that they're going to use their power to love me in service of me. And then ultimately that's what we're looking for from God, right? Like the only thing that can replace control is trust. And like, how do you trust a machine?
So like AI is just this big Rorschach ink blot that we're just kind of projecting our insecurities and fears onto.
Yeah. I mean, isn't everything psychology though?
Yes, in a way. Yes. And, but what about like this take on it? Like maybe like when TVs in the home like came up, like maybe our projective fear mixed with some sci-fi kind of imagination, like sees T2, walking through the door and we're all in trouble. But like, is there not like some felt experience of a family that feels like a losing of control because of the way, I mean, like this, like, my daughter, I mean, she grabs it, out of my hand, and it's like I can tell she's mimicking, she's trying, something's been modeled for her, and like, is there not a sense of a loss of control, like even the way that when the TV came into the living room for the first time, and there was this black box that just kind of like disconnected people and kind of oriented people in a really kind of zombie kind of way.
Yeah,
so
nobody's talking anymore. You don't see that, and that's most salient with children, right?
Yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, to honor parts language, is that vigilant part of us, even though it might kind of overgeneralize or catastrophize, what the fear of AI is. Like, maybe we need to keep that in check, but is there something that maybe we can touch base on in our own experience about the way that technology and information can actually become a dividing wedge in terms of what's most important? Like, would it be better to kind of think more in terms of what we know already, instead of kind of projecting ahead a year, 2 years, 10 years?
Yeah. No, I think it's fair. I mean, I was watching that show on Netflix, Three Body Problem. Have you
Haven't
heard
heard.
of this?
Mm-mm.
It's fantastic. I don't spoiler alert from everyone. Earmuffs if you don't want to know. I highly recommend you watch the show. I don't think it's that big of a deal to know that it involves aliens. Okay. And like the early, but it's a little mysterious for like the first like two episodes or so. You don't know that it's actual aliens. But when I was watching the show and um the aliens had given us this like interface that you put over your head. It's like a video game. It's a virtual reality video game, and you are transported to this different world.
Mm.
And it feels very real. It's like generations ahead of what we have in terms of VR technology.
Yeah.
And they use it to communicate to us. But one of the things, uh, but it became clear too that not only were the people that put on the headset experiencing that VR world, but that the hardware itself and the software through it was impacting the neurological functioning of the user and
Okay.
controlling the user itself. So it wasn't just like it was both ways, right? The
Okay.
experience was both ways. And when I heard that, I was like, I need to go outside. Like, like yes, it's true that we can get locked into all of our screens, our phones, and it goes all the way back to the television. I mean,
Yeah.
you could argue telephones are a problem, right? Because people don't
Hmm.
take the time to slow down and write letters anymore.
Hmm. Right.
So
Right.
it's like I think there's a plus and minus to everything, and you have to have the wherewithal and the virtue to be
Yeah.
able to pull yourself out of what is naturally designed to draw in and lock your attention.
Mm.
Like it's designed to lock your attention. That's the point of all of this technology, to keep you scrolling, to
Yeah.
keep you watching, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I, you know, let's it might be a good segue to talk about Mr. Beast, but let's go to a couple comments here.
Sure.
Going back a little bit, Grisel Bazzani, I believe this is in reference to Pope Francis. Um, when I'd asked like what are some of the thoughts on the issue from in the chat, um, this person, I think it's a female, yeah. She said, my thoughts on the issue: you are being too kind. We are being too kind
Mm.
as we talk about Pope Francis. And that,
Mm.
like, listen, I can empathize with that. I'm trying to listen to my different parts, and there's a part of me that's outraged by some of like the way Pope Francis presents himself. So I can empathize with that, but I don't want to like have my anger be unbridled to the point of wrath
Mm.
and be divisive. I want to try and understand whenever that's one of the biggest problems we have in society today, right? It's this polarization and saying them versus us
Yeah.
Christians and those sinners. Oh, wait a minute. We're sinners too, right? And so I get the rage, but I want to balance it. Do you feel that like a level of anger here
You talking to me?
with regard to the Pope? Like, do you think we're being too kind and too soft on the Pope by giving him the benefit of the doubt?
The point is definitely taken. Like, I probably even like smiled a little bit because yeah, in a kind of social landscape, I'm trying to take as, yeah, balance and kind of diplomatic, as uh, a perspective as I can. But at the same time, like, there are parts of me that have more felt, more extreme, reactions that I think are well deserved right now. And at least for
Yeah.
me, like, the anger comes from the frustration of not knowing a father's heart.
Yeah.
And take that for what you will, and what it says about,
Is that your
me.
stuff?
Sure. So
Projecting onto the Holy Father? Yeah, go on.
sure. um but like that, there is a pain in that, there is an anger in that, because of what I shared earlier about, like, the desire for him to really be more present and more engaged and more direct and more, um Yeah. What did you say before about what a father is meant to be? Just I mean, setting the the boundaries.
Well, he's
About.
like the father, for the father. One of the roles of the father is guidance.
Hmm.
We're all looking for that guidance. We don't know what we're doing.
Hmm.
Like we're all sort of feeling around in the dark in this life. And Pope Benedict used to talk about how we're all looking to those who have come before us. We're looking for a model and for an example. And one of the primary people to do that in our lives are our biological father. But we can't follow them if we don't know their heart. Otherwise, we're feeling around the dark and watching their example, but not knowing what they're experiencing and thinking and feeling. And
Yeah.
and I think there's a parallel here between that and the Holy Father at times.
Hmm.
All right, so the next comments we start to shift into the AI discussion. Grizzle Bazzani also said the robots act like people without souls. Okay, there's a very fine line. C-3PO is cute. I mean, yes. I mean, ask Han Solo though; he's kind of annoying too. Bernadette Torna Bean, when you gain something, you lose something. Yeah, I mean, this is true. We've lost the time it takes to think before you text. Right. So we are gaining things. It's fair. There's like an economy of gains and losses with the technology. We're talking about the pitfalls of it, but I mean, obviously there's benefits to a telephone. Obviously there's benefits to the internet and texting, and hopefully there'll be benefits to AI as well.
Yeah.
Curing cancer and things like that sounds great to me. And then we have Hannah here. I feel like people fear being judged unfairly. So for AI, being judged as an inferior race, not worthy of life or love, I agree that it's projection. Any thoughts on that? The difficulty with AI is reflective of a fear of being judged as inferior, feeling less than. It's like if AI is more intelligent and has more power and dominion over us, then it's actually a hit against our ego. We feel inferior. We feel judged and criticized and rejected and unworthy of life and love.
Yeah.
Like someone has power over us to reject us.
Mm.
They lose the sense of like our value is lost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Again, like my felt experience with AI is very new, but I have a friend who's a professor in a local university, and they're trying to get ahead of this and actually kind of teach courses on how to work with AI. Like this is at a university level. And so, they're trying to take the kind of approach, like, in other words, like kind of saying like, don't let your fears, your projections, your insecurities, kind of keep you from engaging with what is right now, and kind of capitalize on this actually being here in service of you, your relationships, your work, and not the other way around. So
Yeah.
I think that makes sense in theory, and sure. I mean, I think at a certain level, like standing before a supercomputer with all information and ability to kind of put things together faster than I ever could. Like, could I find a part of me who feels inferior to that? Probably no, until that computer takes my job.
I don't see how that can be possible. I think people are always going to want the real thing.
Well, we work in a very interpersonal field, but I'm saying like those who are working, in more mechanical spaces.
You know what though? There was a fear that AI was going to be taking all of those jobs, and that was going to be the concern for a long time.
It didn't
But the
shake
surprise
out
has
that
been
way.
it's been the other way around. It's the creatives
Created more jobs.
It's the jobs of the creatives. But even that, I think there's always going to be a human desire for that which is created by human. If we are built for relationships with humans, just think about Genesis, right? Adam and Eve, like, this at last is flesh of my flesh, bone of my bones. Like,
right.
There's something in the recognition of another human person that makes us want that, as opposed to something that's created, that's mechanical, that's formulaic. I mean, even if the formula is beyond like what I can comprehend as a formula, knowing that it's a formula and isn't reflective of a choice of choice and freedom, that to me, like, I'll always want choice and freedom, because if what I'm longing for at the deepest level is love, something that is systematic and formulaic and programmed can never give me true love. Never. It's like when we try and control people with a guilt trip or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you never call. And then the person calls. Well, we're actually kind of dissatisfied.
Sure.
It's not the freedom of what we really long for at a deep level where someone's
that
saying,
free self-gift and
yeah,
self-donation.
I call you because I love you, because I want to
Sure.
talk to you. Right. So any kind of control manipulation is not a free exchange of love. So I think
the human
people
spirit
are
just knows that.
Yeah. People always want the real thing. We're built for that. And from a Catholic perspective, God built us that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we intuitively know what that is.
Yeah.
And we long for it.
Agreed.
Let's see. Audrey's asking about this. We're kind of alluding into it now. Forgive me if you've already discussed this, but what about using AI as therapists? I've heard that's coming very concerning for me. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Like you can't. I don't think you can
manualize to that degree.
Yeah, I don't think you can manualize. I mean, there's something that when we're training our clinicians at Catholic Psych, when you first start becoming a clinician, you have a therapist voice. Right. Mm-hmm. You have a therapist voice where it's not truly authentically real. It's like, the right thing to say that is therapeutic. You read it in your book in graduate school that this is empathy. I'm sorry you feel that way. You have great courage for sharing that with me today. It's almost like robotic, and like a really advanced clinician, we try and train that out of people. I get
more of your authentic self. That is
right.
the healing agent of change.
Yeah, and it's very understandable in the beginning of becoming a clinician because it's terrifying to try and help someone because we're such a mystery, right? And so in that anxiety, we look for some kind of formula for how to help people. But the more you get off the page and you respond from your interior self, I really don't think that can be duplicated.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I mean, I agree. I have your conversation with Dr. Greg from last week, in my head, and he was kind of moving more from an intuitive place. He was saying that he thinks something has shifted, something has changed. I think he was even pointing to the week, that something significant, with what was it, GPT 4.0 was kind of breaking open. So there's a part of me who wants to understand more from his perspective, what his intuition there is kind of saying about to what degree this could interfere with genuine human relationships. But I do from a faith-based perspective, I just do have that faith that the human spirit can never be duplicated, replicated. There's something about that we are created for, like you said about Genesis, flesh of my flesh, bone of my bones.
Yeah. Well, I think what Dr. Greg and I were talking about a few weeks ago is when we saw some of the capabilities of the current gen of OpenAI and ChatGPT. By the way, 5.0 is coming pretty soon, but this is 4.0 dash letter O, which is the latest update. And there were examples of how the system was mimicking an approximation of a human interaction where it almost played to the emotions of the user. Right. And so somebody was going for a job interview and was wearing a goofy hat and said to the AI, "How do I look?"
I heard that. Right.
And she's and it laughed. It's "Oh, you're so silly. Well, you'd be great in this context, but I don't think you should wear that." So you can approximate it, you can replicate it, but I don't think you can replicate it over time. The nuances over time, maybe in some contexts, but Audrey says here, when you're in need of healing, the fake thing feels good. That's true. But I think it'll only feel good in the way pornography feels good. It's short-term gratification that has major consequences at the same time, although it's not experienced right away. Mm-hmm. Right. If someone's going through this kind of ecstatic experience of viewing pornography, it's very the guilt or the shame is kind of drowned out, but it's almost imperceptible. And as we're helping people heal, we actually want them to pay attention to the fact that it's not a completely ecstatic, joyful experience when they look at it. Yeah, and then when the pleasure subsides, they're just left with all of the psychological pain and disconnection and loneliness and misperceptions about the opposite sex and relationships and everything else. So yes, it might feel good for a moment, but look at the devastation it leaves. Like right when the pleasure goes away. I think it'll be like AI therapy or AI fake relationships will be similar to that. Where like if someone's in a dark place, a fake human person, or if maybe they get to the point where it's in a robot, might feel good in the moment, but something's going to gnaw at us because God made us the way we are. We're not built for that. And there's going to be negative consequences that maybe we can't even foresee that like come in with the fake human interaction. What do you think?
Yeah, like at a, I guess at a macro level, like how long did it take for us to sense like the sexual revolution, for example, was a counterfeit, like that was actually incredibly exciting, time in history to kind of be living through before we started realizing that there was a significant impact, negatively on a lot of different levels of human experience. So like, are we moving into a season right now of history where we're just going to have to kind of like repeat the mistake, I guess you can say?
Yeah.
And like where in time, although I have no clue where the research is right now or the development of like AI therapy, but it does make sense. Like I have a bunch of them like on my bookshelf. Like when we think about, journals with prompts, it's like that's a very isolated experience that invites you into your interior, not as it shouldn't be as a, some kind of, counterfeit for human relationship, but it's an extension of the kind of interior, self-reflection needed to then enter into a relationship, more deeply or authentically or vulnerably. I think what a gift then, if AI, was going to, help individuals in specific kind of subsets of psychological growth to kind of come to know themselves more deeply. But again, that might be hyper optimistic. I don't know. It's
it's a good point. It's very possible that there are some actually positive therapeutic benefits. I'm trying to think about like just using it as like a journal prompt or some kind of like feedback mechanism or something like that, but doesn't supplant a person. Right. But like there's like it provides tools that even a therapist would a therapist would use those tools, but it's not the person itself. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
All right, let's shift. We got a few minutes left here. So by popular request, I mean we can talk about Mr. Beast a little bit, which I have a love of Mr. Beast.
I've never seen a Mr. Beast video. I hear his name all the time. I actually had to go to the link you sent me before to get a sense of what he actually does.
Yes. So Mr. Beast, for those who don't know, is now the most popular subscribed to YouTuber in the world. He was already on an individual basis, but he now his channel has more subscribers than, hold on one second, I'm trying to pull it up. Here's the record here. T-Series. So that was the world's biggest YouTube channel this has been a long-running battle for the most subscribers. The Indian music label T-Series, which uploads trailers and music videos, held the record for the largest YouTube channel for 5 years before it was toppled on Sunday. Mr. Beast's real name, Jimmy Donaldson, was already the individual with the largest following. So now it's 269 million subscribers. And, I've done some study in recent months over the last year on how to grow a YouTube channel. I worked a little bit with Dara Leaves, who's one of the consultants to Mr. Beast. And it's so interesting to learn about why Mr. Beast is so successful.
Yeah.
And there's such an intense focus on learning how to get people to get people pulled into a story that will get them to click. Like the story starts right from the thumbnail, get them to click, and then like tell a story where they stay engaged. There's like, it's just like classic storytelling, like rising action, that there's like a secondary hook in the middle of it to keep your attention. And then it climaxes, then it falls. Like all his videos follow the basic. Can you give me an example of that? Like, well, his are crazy. So it's like stuff like his videos are things that you just like dream about, like your wildest dreams that are just so extreme
Like
that
as
you
a kid,
can't.
you say like, imagine if we did this.
Right.
It's like he kind of makes that a
He's
reality.
just so over the top. Like what one of his early videos was, I'm gonna count. I forget the number, but it's like I'm gonna count to 100,000. And he just
Just
counted to
do it.
100,000. Yeah. And another time he was starting to get bigger, and someone was like, someone was like, I'll give you $5,000 to promote. Like his channel was growing. I'll give you $5,000. And he was a kid. He was like 19 years old. I'll give you $5,000 to market my company or my business, whatever it is, on your channel live, and to do it like an ad read. And he goes, give me $10,000 and I will go outside and give it to a homeless person in your name. It's like he's always thinking extreme, like what will get people to watch. And now he has like surviving on the ocean on a raft for 7 days, or like being buried alive for 7 days, or World Olympics. You know, he has people from every country, like where he comes up like with these Olympic trials, or what would you do for $500,000? Like crazy stuff. Like he'll do some that are like $1 million hotel night stay versus a $1 hotel night stay. And he'll just go up and like show you the differences of what it's like to stay in a hotel for $1 in a night, all the way up to $1 million. So he just does things that are super engaging, but it's all about getting your dopamine hits to stay locked in. And even like down to the edits, like don't have one, don't watch like you have to switch the edit and do a different camera angle after a certain amount of seconds, because if you're staring at the same screen for too long, tension just takes off. Yep. Like certain colors on the thumbnails to get you like the pop relative to others to make it. I mean, it's a whole world of systematically getting you to watch him. That's why he's as good as he is. At the same time, he is maniacal about it. He's absolutely maniacal. I mean, he will tell you, you watch his interviews, he's like, the only thing I care about is being the most popular YouTuber of all time. It's the only thing I care about. And he's like, all I do is work on my YouTube. It's all I think about. And, you know, I think he's starting to realize that like, I think he has a girlfriend now, and he's starting to realize that there's a little bit more to life, but like the amount of time and energy it takes to focus and increase views and get people to watch you, it's like never ending. Yeah. This is what I learned as I was going through my training. I could be doing research on how to grow this YouTube channel 24/7 and do nothing else. So, I mean, it's a major accomplishment. I don't know. I mean, but you have to have such an obsession.
Yeah.
And I go right to like thinking of the psychology of what would drive him to be that obsessed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm thinking at another level. It's like, what would drive that many people to be interested in watching what he puts out? And like, I'm wondering, I don't know, like, is he, I don't know, capitalizing on something broken or wounded about human nature that makes him as successful as he is? Like,
yeah,
Oprah, for example. Like Oprah, you know, she has done some good interviews, has done some good work for different people. But like, when did things tip to the audience members knowing in the back of their head that we might get a car today, you know, just by kind of showing up into the audience? Like, you know, that's a very odd combination of kind of, you know, a money-based, you know, platform, you know, versus actually having a meaningful message that you're trying to articulate. So I'm just wondering, like, if a lot of his videos are about like, you know, kind of what will people do for this amount of money? Like, I don't know if that's kind of it. I mean, that's an
one of his buckets.
Social experiment.
Yeah, it's one of his buckets. He has what are called content buckets. So there's like different types of videos on his channel, which not everyone will like this type, but some people will like this type, but there's an overlap between the two, and it like keeps you on the channel. All this is psychology. Keeps you on the channel to have videos of different types. Like the altruistic giveaway is certainly a type.
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly a type that you're pointing to. But I also think he's a really good guy. I do. I think he doesn't really care about money. He drives a Buick because he gives everyone on his team.
So what is your sense about what is driving him then? If it's not the financial.
I mean, I don't know enough about his history as a child. I mean, psychological theory would tell me that there's some kind of validation he receives by achieving a high level of success in that world.
Power.
So yeah, well, I don't even know if it's about power, but it's just recognition and affirmation. but I don't know about his childhood. I mean, we can imagine, work backwards and think that, you know, somewhere along the way he learned that he's loved only if he is successful in this way, or he was rejected. He talked about how he was very, very alone in his early years of YouTube. He believed in it, but like he was kind of rejected. He didn't really have any friends. He didn't have any money. Nobody believed in him. Everybody thought he was crazy. And then there's this switch when he became successful, and everyone went from thinking he was insane to a genius. And so, I mean, there's probably some validation in the rejection that he felt for being unsuccessful. But I mean, I don't know the guy. I just see how burnt out he can be at times in interviews. Like, not on the videos itself, but I've seen so many interviews with him, and like he's real honest about how hard it is, and that he doesn't recommend the life that he's living to anyone because it's so brutal.
Yeah.
It's like,
no, it's interesting to think about that evolution, and you and Dr. Greg were getting at this, you know, last week about the kind of movement from like capitalizing on the human drive for pleasure, and then when pleasure kind of taps out, you know, you go towards power. And then, so here's my plug for Viktor Frankl for the day. So he's considered like the third school of Viennese psychiatry, and so he looked at you know Freud's will to pleasure, and then why ultimately that doesn't satisfy, and then he looked at Adler's will to power, and he said, well, that gets you to a certain point. He said, but you know, in a concentration camp, otherwise, like you're not experiencing pleasure. You certainly have no power. So what keeps a human person going? So I wonder, like, if something about his personal life that you know about, that he's starting to shift towards values outside of maybe the pleasure of money and the power that comes. I don't know, 300 million people, is that it? That's a pretty powerful experience.
Well, what happens when you're at the top? It's like, I think of sports, like athletes who, you know, Michael Jordan was the best there was in the 90s, won 6 titles, and he would make up reasons to keep himself competitive. He would fabricate someone talking negatively about him on the other team to motivate him to play on a given night. It's like you almost have to lie to yourself to have that like anger-based or like motivation to be successful when you're at the top of the mountain.
and then he joins the MLB and tries baseball and gets
but then comes back.
That's true. That's true.
Catherine says here, at some point, it seems that the marketing gets manipulative when it leverages our human anxiety, regardless of the purpose. Even a good end doesn't justify the means. Well, it's a great question. I think there's a lot to unpack here. I wish Dr. Greg was here because he has a lot to say about the power and beauty of marketing. And I think a healthy vision of, there's certainly, like Catherine's point is well taken here. People definitely use marketing and mass marketing to manipulate people and to control them into spending money at the service of the self or the company. And it's really bad. But it's not as if Catholic Psych doesn't use marketing. We have to get the word out there. And I worked with a marketing consultant one time, and she was really talented and gifted. Shout out Veronica Romney if you're watching. And she talked about the beauty of how she really believed that sometimes people get in their own way of what they need and what will help them. And good marketing is designed to help people get out of their own way. And if you believe in the product that you're selling, which is certainly true of Catholic Psych, we want to help people. But if we have own like psychological obstacles that are helping us from getting the care that we need, then marketing can be used for good. It can be dangerous, but it can and should be used in that context. It's getting the word out. In some ways, it's like evangelization, you know?
Yeah. I agree with, Catherine's point is so well taken. And yet you just added a nuance to it that, again, is a little bit outside of like my scope of, I don't know, expertise, but like you said, Dr. Greg, I think probably knows this experientially as you do in different ways, especially starting to get into YouTube market and advertising and things like that.
Yeah. We got just another minute here. One last quick story that by popular demand we have to attend to. 3-year-old girl had raisins stuck in her nose. Okay. Toddler who suffered sinus pain and lethargy for 3 months was found to have a raisin stuck up in her nose. Peyton Handley of Cumbernauld, North Lanarkshire, told her parents, Craig and Christy, that she had pain and would scratch around the area. Once their ear, nose, and throat specialist managed to solve the mystery by fishing out a raisin that had been lodged in her nose. Mr. Handy, a former Army medic, told BBC Radio Scotland, Good Morning Scotland program that his daughter had been showing symptoms like bad breath for around 3 or 4 months. Symptoms persisted. The toddler, 3-year-old, showed discomfort and scratched around her nose, further leading her parents to believe she had something trapped in her airway. Virginia said it was hard to tell when and how the raisin got caught in her daughter's airway. Now, as a new parent, do you have thoughts on your daughter, your lovely daughter, who's just turned 1? This is what you have ahead of you: sticking raisins up her nose.
I guess the takeaway is I'll give her grapes for a while.
Well, you got to cut those grapes. Listen, you'll learn. The parenting books will tell you, if you like the skin of the grape, they can choke on the grape. They got to be very, very small. I've lived through this. It can drive you nuts with all the ways you got to protect your kids.
Well, my hypervigilant part doesn't need another thing to be terrified about, so I'll probably just register that somewhere and never look at it again. But thank you for bringing it to my attention as a possibility.
Well, listen, this is just to go full circle. We were talking about AI being about control. We cannot control our children. No matter how hard we try to control them, we love them so much, and we're scared that they're going to harm themselves or make mistakes. But all of parenting is encompassed in the fourth joyful mystery, right? It's Amen. Mary and Joseph went to the temple and they said, God, he's yours, he's not ours.
Amen.
And parenting is about, wiping the hiney butt when they're born, keeping them alive, and then slowly relinquishing that control to the point when they're, young adults. And it's like, hey, go make your mistakes. I'm here when you need me. But that's really hard to do because toddlers stick raisins up their nose.
Lord, give us the grace.
All right. Dr. Gerard, thanks for coming on today.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.